All right. So I am trying this new thing where I make these slideshows and I'm going to embed them in Canvas so you can always go back to them and look at them. So today's topic is going to be genetics. And this is a pretty hard topic. It's probably one of the hardest topics in biology until you go into really molecular level stuff. In fact, I took a course called molecular biology and it was really hard. It was a lot of genetics. So we're going to cover some of the key points here. This is a little confusing because it's going to be jumping from topic to topic. In this bio course, it's created by another company. I didn't create it. I will be rewriting it though. They are assuming that you already know basics about genetics, right? And if you don't already know basics about genetics, Kendrick, oh, the worst. Why do you have to chew on stuff right now? Stop. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so they assume that you already know how to do a Punnett square, that you already know some of the basics about genes, maybe that you already know something about inheritance, right? So if you're starting this course and you don't know anything about genetics, it's going to be a little confusing to just dive in, right? We're going to spend some time reviewing the basics of genetics and talking about dihybrid crosses. I saw a lot of people struggling with that question on the quiz, so I actually made a video about how to do it. We're going to talk about something called karyotyping, which is another way that we can look at DNA, look at chromosomes, and see abnormalities in a person or in a baby. And then in a breakout group, you guys are going to research these two genetic diseases, very different diseases, but just to sort of learn about what kind of genetic diseases there are and sort of how they work and why they might still be in the population. So I wanted to show you guys some important links here. The first one is I created this page in Canvas that I've linked here called Genetics Vocab and Helpful Links, right? And I have all of this vocabulary here, and I strongly recommend that you write this down, print it out, put it in your notebook, make sure you know all of these words, because they will appear in this in some regard. They don't really use homozygous and heterozygous quite as much, but that's a pretty common terminology for genetics. So please make sure that you understand what these words mean and that you've written them down. And then I also included videos, right? Completely optional to watch, but might help you understand a little better what's going on. And then I also made this video that I put on YouTube where I filmed myself doing the dihybrid crosses. And at first the videoing is not super great because it's really hard to video and write at the same time, but I figured it out. So you can watch this video and I show you exactly how to set up the cross, how to do the cross, and how to calculate the percentages. So if that was a quiz question that you missed, or if you haven't taken the quiz yet, this will help you. Okay, so that was some nice video and link stuff, just to get that out of the way. Okay, so now we're getting into the notes part. So you might want to write down stuff as I'm going here. You may also have access to this after, right? I've embedded it on Canvas already, so you can always go back and write this down or use it to review. So there was a lot of questions in this module so far about meiosis and how it helps increase genetic diversity, right? And there wasn't a lot of questions, I guess. I just graded a lot of questions about it. So that's the biggest thing here is the connection between meiosis and genetics, right? They're related. So meiosis creates the sex cells or the gametes. Those gametes form a new person, right? Which gives them their genetic diversity. So there's three main ways here that this can happen. They only asked you for two on the quiz, but I want to make sure you know there's three possibilities. There's independent assortment, right? Which means that genes separate from each other independently. So genes are not necessarily moving together, right? Sometimes they do, which we found out recently, but for the most part, they independently separate. So you could end up getting many different combinations, which we'll talk about in a second. Crossing over happens in prophase 1, right? Where pieces of the chromosomes actually break off and recombine, right? They literally break off and rearrange. Very disturbing. And as you can imagine, a lot could go wrong there, right? If they don't attach correctly again, there's a problem. And then lastly, a really obvious one, you're getting genetic information from 2 parents, right? You get one allele or one copy of a gene from each parent, which helps increase genetic diversity, right? Because you're not reliant on one parent to provide everything to you. So we might think about a bacteria. Bacteria just reproduce with mitosis, right? They just divide and make a copy of themselves. So when they do that, if their parent had something wrong with its DNA, right, they inherit it. There's no questions there, right? You may not inherit all of the problems with your parents' DNA, or you may inherit all the great things, right? There's a lot of different options here. So how are genes and gametes related? So this is the most important concept here between meiosis and genetics, right? We have our dominant genes and our recessive genes. The dominant genes are the ones that show up when they're present. Recessive genes, you need 2 of them to show up. We use uppercase letters for dominant genes and lowercase letters for recessive genes, right? So even if you have one recessive allele, you still show a dominant trait. So I'm going to be going into some annotations. Let's see how this is going to work. Okay. So even if you have a big D and a little d, you're still going to show the dominant trait, right? You inherit one letter from each parent. So another key distinction here is that not every gene is dominant or recessive. A lot of people are, like, oh, well, eye color is blue eyes are recessive and brown eyes are this and da-da-da. No, eye color is so complicated and it's controlled by many genes, right? It's called a polyphenic trait, which means that many genes contribute to it. So it's harder to trace that in genetics. It's possible to trace it, right? But you would need your entire sequence of DNA and you would need to be looking at multiple genes to see where you got them from, like meaning which parent, right? Other things like height, right? You might have noticed too, sometimes in families, you're like, why am I so much shorter or taller than everyone else in my family, right? It's because height is controlled by many genes. And it can end up coming from, multiple generations. Like your grandfather or great-grandfather might have been super tall and now you appear super tall, right? So some of these genes are not dominant and recessive, but that's the easiest way to talk about them. So a lot of times we do. Okay, I guess I didn't need to write on the slide. It's the next one. All right, so genes and gametes. I put this awesome Wikipedia picture of the widow's peak just because I thought this girl's face was like, she looks way too happy to have a widow's peak. She's just like, ah. Okay, so each sperm or egg cell will contain one copy of an allele for a gene, right? So if the parent has the genotype big W, little w, meaning they have a widow's peak, what are their possible gametes? So this is a parent, right? They have one copy of each gene that they got from their parents. Now, if they're making, let's say this is a dad and he's going to make sperm cells, right? Then what is going to end up happening is his sperm cells could have either a big W or a little w. This is going to be hard to tell if it's a lowercase or uppercase, isn't it? Okay, it's tellable. All right, so those are the possibilities. The sperm cell could have either a big W in it or it could have a little w, right? In this case, it's going to be a 50% chance of getting either one. And it is, it's random, right? So you may inherit the little w, you may inherit the big W, right? Completely left up to chance. So those are the possible gametes. That's it, right? This was a step that a lot of people missed when they started doing the dihybrid cross or when they started thinking about inheritance, right? You have to think about the gamete possibilities, right? Because genetics is all about possibilities, probability, percentages. And if you're not thinking about the gametes, the egg and the sperm, right, then you're going to miss some possible combinations. So there are geneticists that actually do this for a living, right, where people come in for genetic counseling is what it's called, and you can sit down, they'll take DNA samples, right, and they'll help predict if your offspring will have any, terrible diseases. A lot of families do that when something runs in their family. So if you have a disease that's super, super intense, right, you might go get that testing done. If you find out that there's like a 75% chance that your child will have it, right, then that might change whether you want to have a child. So we'll be talking about that later too, the morals in this. There's a lot of moral questions that can come up in genetics. How much should we know, right? And how much should we be able to control about this? Because we can know a lot, which is kind of scary. Okay, so now we're looking at two separate traits. This is getting more into the dihybrid cross concept. Let's say we're looking at widow's peak and attached earlobes, right? From the Mendel assignment that you did, you may remember having attached earlobes is a recessive trait. I actually have attached earlobes. I have a lot of recessive traits, actually. And I don't have a widow's peak. So pretty interesting stuff. There's some other ones that we'll talk about later. But basically, you may have been surprised, right, to even notice that there were options for earlobes, right? Because who knew that there were two kinds and that it was inherited this simply, recessive or dominant. So what we want to know here is, oh, no worries. I'm glad that you appeared. Okay, you haven't missed much. We're talking about gametes and how to get them from looking at traits right now. Okay, so, oops. So these are two separate traits, widow's peak and attached earlobes. They are not inherited together, right? They are not inherited together. So they're going to independently sort. One of these key things we learned from Mendel, which, by the way, that guy was amazing. He figured out all of this stuff, and he didn't even know what DNA was. No one knew that DNA existed. And here's Mendel growing pea plants in his yard, right, and writing down observations about them for years. Very intense. Also, clearly a very boring time, right? There wasn't much to do except grow pea plants and write about them. Okay, so these are our parents. What possible gametes can we have, right? So there's always going to be 4 possibilities, right? You may be thinking, why would there be 4? Well, we have 4 different traits here. Oh, good. This is like a free write marker thing. Yay. Okay, so this big W could move into a sperm cell, right? So we have a big W. Wow, this is kind of hard to write with. All right, and then a little a could also move with that W, right? Because we're going to get one allele from each parent. So we're saying here you got a big W and this first little a. Or, I'm not going to write or again because it's actually hard. All right, or you could get the big W and this other little a. And you may be thinking, well, that's the same exact combination. It is, right? But you have a 50% chance of getting that as your genotype, right? That's important to write it twice like this to see. There, once we have all 4 out here, there's a 50% chance that's what you're getting, right? Or you could get the little w with the little a, the first little a, right? Or you could get the little w. This is fun. With the other little a, right? So again, you have a 50% chance of getting little w, little a as your genotype, right? Those are the 4 possible gametes because you have to think of each gene as independent, even if it's the same allele, right? They're all independent letters. So the best way to do it is like I just did, starting with the first trait, right? Knowing that this big W is going to have 2 options, knowing that the little w is going to have 2 options, and then figuring out the A's, right? In theory, we could add a third trait, right? And then we'll have even more possibilities. Because if we add a third trait, let's say we add little c's, right? Now we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have more than 6 possibilities here, right? I think we have, I want to say we have 12, but we would have to figure that out. There's a lot, right? So if you think about yourself as a human, you have millions of traits. That means there's millions of combinations in your gametes, right? And we're just looking at 2 traits here, and there's 4 possibilities. So imagine if we're looking at 300 traits. Okay. So that was something that was just really commonly missed. So I wanted to explicitly explain it. Again, I also made a video about this. Wow, you have to delete like each line here. It's kind of annoying. Oh, no, we go. Okay, there we go. So make sure that you're aware of that. When you have 2 traits like this, there are 4 possibilities. All right. So the next thing, this is going to be getting into poll everywhere, which is, I really like it. My 6th graders liked it. We'll see if you guys like it. Basically, what you do is you either go to this website, pollev.com/JamieDinsMoo. It's not my whole name, 438. Or you can text that to this number here. And what's going to happen is it's going to ask you which option you're picking. Right, so if I go to the website, this is what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to give you guys about a minute to do this. Oh, that's good. It's not loading. There we go. Okay, so it says, what are the 4 possible gametes from a parent with the 2 traits shown below? It's next to it, but supposed to be below. Big B, little b, and big T, little t, right? So you're going to list out the 4 possible gametes. I kind of gave it away in the question. I didn't even realize. This one's a practice, really, to see if we can learn how to use poll everywhere. So go on to this website. Here, pollev.com/JamieDinsMoo438. Or do the texting version, right? And look, someone already did it. Woo, 1 person. And then you're going to pick A or B as your answer. And this one, I didn't even realize how obvious it was because of the question, but we'll pretend it's not. So I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds. I actually have to listen to a voicemail. Oh, maybe she didn't leave me a voicemail. No, she did. Okay, not important. Okay, sweet. So now we have more people responding, and then I should be able to see how many people respond on my end. But basically, the concept here is there's 4 possible gametes, right? So even though all of them are, oh no, they're all different. So we could have a big B and a big T. We could have a big B and a little t. We could have a little b and a little t, or a little b and a big T. Right? So there are 4 possibilities here. And again, that's because the genes independently, Kendrick, the genes independently sort, right? So the B and the T do not move together. And each letter is its own trait or its own allele. Okay, so we're going to try another one like this. I think. How do I go to the next slide? Why won't it let me go? Oh, Tells me what A is. Okay, so I have to activate this poll, I think. I'm still getting used to how this thing works. All right, activating the second poll, which is, why are there 4 possibilities? Why are there 4 possible gametes when we are discussing 2 traits? So read this one and think about it for a second, and then submit your answer. What are you doing over here? All right, I'm seeing lots of B's. I wish it showed me how many people did it on this, but I have to go to the other page to see. All right, 6 responses, all B's. Wow, all right, awesome. Yeah, genes independently sort is the correct answer. And I put these other ones in here just to show you that it's a little bit misleading, right? Some people might think, oh, well, it's because there's 4 sperm or 4 egg cells made, right? That's a pretty logical thought. However, it doesn't make sense because, like I said, once we add more traits, we're going to end up having more possibilities. In fact, I think it's a factorial is how we figure that out. I will get back to you guys on that because I think there's a factorial number of possibilities or something like that. It's really complicated. Okay. And then that's how you do a dihybrid cross. Yeah, but that's not the reason why, right? Okay. So dihybrid cross, steps for success here. I just wrote this out for those of us who are struggling with this. And some people have it down, right? So if you have it down, good for you. Otherwise, I did make this video of me doing 1, 2 actually. You want to find the possible gametes, right? There's going to be 4. You want to set up your Punnett square. Thank you, Jacob. You want to calculate the percentage by seeing how many boxes out of 16 have that genotype or phenotype, right? And again, that vocab sheet that I showed in the beginning is going to be super helpful here. The genotype is the actual letters or the genes, right? That's the big T, little t. The phenotype, you can think of it as the physical, what you see and what you look like, right? So if you have a big T and a little t, and that has to do with tallness, right? Then you may appear tall even though you do have 1 recessive gene, even though I already told you that height doesn't get inherited that way, but still. In plants, it does. So being able to distinguish between those 2, the genotype or the letters and the phenotype or the physical, how you look, right? That's a key thing here. And then I said, just remember, they can be different, right? Your genotype might be a different combination than what you're seeing necessarily. And then you can watch my video, which I linked again. We're not going to watch it because it's like 9 minutes long, but you should watch it. Okay, so then here's our last poll everywhere question. And I have to activate it. And we're actually going to be doing a lab about this one. So there's this chemical called PTC. And it is odorless, but it has a very strong taste. So in genetics, it's actually inherited in a dominant and recessive manner. So we have our tasters and our non-tasters. If you're a taster, right, you have either a homozygous dominant, so 2 big P's, or a heterozygous genotype, a big P and a little p. If you're a non-taster, then you have the recessive genes, which is 2 little p's, or homozygous recessive. So much vocab. All right. So if you are a non-taster, what are the possible genotypes of your parents? So if you submit letters, we should see the letters appear as a cloud. I think it's going to work how I want it to, but I'm not 100% on this. So it might be a mess, but we'll see. While you're thinking about this, or right before you think about it, I wanted to say one more thing. So we're actually going to do this, right? I have PTC paper where they put the chemical on this little strip of paper, and you're going to get the opportunity to taste it, right? And I can't taste it. So to me, it tastes like paper, right? It just tastes like nothing. But people who can taste it describe it as the worst bitter taste that they've ever tasted in their life, right? So usually when people can taste it, they're like, ugh, and they make this insane face and they immediately need water and freak out. And then I just taste paper, right? And there's actually a lot of research about this relating to your likeness for food, right? If you're a really picky eater and you hate like everything, there's a good chance you can probably taste PTC and that you might even have two big Ps. You might have a homozygous dominant genotype, which allows you to taste more, I guess, like sensitively than other people, right? So especially if you hate vegetables, that's usually part of it, is that it's actually in your genes. All right, that's my little spiel about PTC. We're gonna do it, we're gonna taste the paper. So right now I want you to think, you might need to write this out. If you have somebody who is a non-taster, they have two little Ps, what are the possibilities that their parents could have been? Ooh, yay, it is making a word. So it's only gonna put one word. So if someone wrote possible parents are at the beginning of theirs, but then it put those words in there too, because it's gonna make like a cloud. But I like this. Parents could be non-tasters. Sure, right? So both your parents could be non-tasters, and then you're a non-taster. Makes perfect sense. Same thing here, little p, non-tasters. Could they be anything else? I'm looking for some letters. There is another possibility for the parents. They don't have to be non-tasters. What else could they be? So they could also be big P, little p. So I'm actually gonna try to get out of this. Or somebody who's in it, type a big P, little p, so we can see that here in our word cluster. They could be a big P, little p, right? Because you could inherit little p's from both parents, but they're both still tasters, right? That's pretty rare. There's only a 25% chance that would happen. Oh, you did try the big P, little p. That's weird, it's not showing up. Okay, well, yeah. So there's a 25% chance that you could be a non-taster if your parents are both tasters, right? But it's not as likely. If one of your parents has the big P genotype, then there's no way that you're not a taster, right? So we will explore this concept a little more, and the word cloud kind of worked how I wanted it to. I'm still playing with this poll everywhere. It has all these options. So I'm trying to like see, I just wanted kind of like a list of what people thought. And this is kind of it, but it looks a little messy, but it works. Okay. So we're done with poll everywhere. If you hated it, it's over. If you liked it, it will be back. Okay. So what can go wrong with genetics? We're kind of shifting our thoughts here, right? A lot of diseases are genetic, meaning that they come from your DNA. Right? There's a lot of talk even with insurance. And if you have a genetic disease, right, insurance wants to be able to turn you away because then they know they're going to be dealing with that disease for the rest of their life, right? Paying for that. So there's a lot of moral questions here. Like, should they be allowed to do that? Look at your DNA and say, I don't know. you have this disease. We don't cover that, right? It's unfortunately starting to happen more and more. So sometimes the chromosomes themselves don't actually separate correctly, and you can actually have more or less than 46 chromosomes. Most of the time that ends up just not working. It's lethal, right? The fetus will die. A lot of miscarriages are because of that. Inaccurate amount of chromosomes. In a few cases, though, you can still survive, which we'll look at one in a second. There can also be tons of mutations, right? There can be deletions, there can be insertions, there can be rearrangements of the chromosomes that could result in something going wrong. A lot of times mutations actually do nothing, right? They're called null mutations, N-U-L-L. They don't actually matter, right? But a lot of times they do matter. So we're going to look at this thing called a karyotype, which is a Greek term. Karyon means seed or kernel, right? In this case, it's in reference to the nucleus. The nucleus of the cell is a seed or a kernel. That's kind of what the Greeks called it. Hence, we have the prokaryote cell, the eukaryotic cell, right? Those karyotic words, that actually comes from Greek. So a karyotype, it describes the number of chromosomes and how they look under a microscope. So in a karyotype for humans, which there are karyotypes for other organisms, right? For plants, for dogs, for whatever. We have 46 chromosomes, they make 23 pairs, right? Why do they make pairs? Because you get one chromosome from mom, one chromosome from dad. The genes line up on the chromosomes, right? So we'll look at that in a second. You actually see banding or dark parts and light parts on the chromosomes that show genes. And then, of course, we can tell the sex of a person from this too, right? An XX is a female and an XY is a male. And again, thinking about gametes, that means you have a 50% chance of being born female or male, right? Because it's all about this Y chromosome. 50% of your dad's sperm, which I know is kind of gross to think about, had Ys in them. Okay, sometimes this stuff gets a little personal, you know. So this is what a karyotype looks like for a human, right? It's a little blurry. In fact, I probably could have found a better one. Let's try Google Images here. Oh, this one looks, oh, so here's like a computerized version of it, which is completely fine. It's not the real chromosomes, right? It's the computer model of what they should look like. And they show us both possibilities here, an XX or an XY. Notice the Y chromosome is really tiny, right? There's not a lot of genes on the Y chromosome. And the chromosomes vary in size, but notice that there are these bands, right? Those are genes. So scientists have actually mapped all of the genes on a human pretty much. And you can actually buy posters and stuff that show you where all the genes are, and it's pretty interesting. But this is all recent science because we didn't even know about DNA until the 50s, right? And we could not possibly have known about this until after we knew about DNA. So this is still kind of a new science, genetics. So this is a real human karyotype, which is probably why it's less quality. And you can tell the chromosomes they're not like perfect little straight lines. They're a little wavy. Some of them are like bent, right? That's perfectly fine. And this person is an XY, so this is from a male. So that's how it should look, right? Sometimes, for example, with someone who has Down syndrome, right, we call it trisomy 21 because they have 3 chromosomes for chromosome 21, right? There's this arrow pointing at it here. So they actually have an extra chromosome. They have 47 chromosomes. And in this case, chromosome 21, if you have an extra copy of it, you can still live, right? But you end up having lots of different defects, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Down syndrome, right? If you're not, you should look it up. It's a really difficult disease for people to have, right? And for parents to help raise their kid with. So chromosome 21 you can still live. If you have an extra chromosome 1, for example, that is a lethal situation. The fetus or the baby will die, and it's usually a miscarriage. Again, right, a lot of this stuff is super intense, and a lot of people have really personal feelings about it. And that's what makes genetics hard too, is the morals and the questioning about what is right and wrong here. So to look at other diseases here, we're going to break out. And these are not diseases that have extra chromosomes. I just wanted to show you really that these karyotypes exist, right? And that this is another method of looking at genetics, is that we can actually see the chromosomes. Sometimes it also helps you understand the alleles coming from parents, right? That they make pairs. So I picked 2 genetic diseases here: Huntington's disease and sickle cell anemia. Both really intense diseases, very different. So, I actually have them open already, which now I'm wasting my, I hate this stupid menu bar. Okay. All right, well, it went away. Okay, so I made a shell of a PowerPoint for you guys here, which I'm in it twice. So for Huntington's disease, right, I broke down into questions. So I'm going to randomly assign you to a breakout room, and Tay-Sachs is hereditary, right? In fact, the genetic counseling that I was talking about earlier, lots of people go get tested for Tay-Sachs because it's really, really horrible. Huntington's is crazy. People in this group, this is a scary one. I won't tell you why because I don't want to give it away. But basically, you're going to be dividing up between however many people you have in your room, each person taking a slide, just writing a few things on it, right? This doesn't need to be crazy detailed, just a few pieces of information. So how is this inherited? Is it a dominant gene? Is it a recessive gene? Is it inherited in some other way? Does having a big H and a little h matter, right? Looking at the possibilities for inheritance here. A picture, right? A family tree is another way to look at genetics, also known as pedigrees, right? Which later we might look at a Russian Tsar pedigree to look at hemophilia, which is also hereditary. So family tree or disease characteristics, some kind of picture here. Symptoms, what happens if you have this disease? Which populations is this disease most common in, right? This could be race, this could be age, this could be geographic location. Why is it such a scary disease? I'm telling you, it's scary. And then you're going to have one person in your group come up with a Punnett square example, right? So writing your own question, I wrote like an example. Okay. So erase my example and then put your own. But you want it to make sense, so make it about Huntington's disease. Same kind of thing going on with sickle cell. You could change the layout and everything too. I don't care. I just picked random ones. How is it disease? How is it inherited? In this case, there is something very special about the heterozygous genotype. Having a big S and a little s for sickle cell matters, right? So looking at that. Drawing out the genotypes and explaining the characteristics. Which population is this most common in? Compare malaria resistance, right? So this one, I'll kind of give it away. If you have sickle cell disease, you actually are resistant to malaria, right? So that's an example of how this disease has kind of kept going, because malaria can kill you, right? And sickle cell isn't going to kill you necessarily. It might just sort of impact your life. Include a picture, and then come up with your own Punnett square example involving this disease. And again, for some reason, I didn't even write 2 letters there. Okay, so I'm going to assign you guys to breakout rooms, and I'm going to post the links in your breakout room for you to work on this. It doesn't need to be, like I said, it doesn't need to be super detailed. I just want you to get kind of an idea. You can talk in the chat in the document. If you talk in the chat in Zoom, it goes to everybody. So if you are in your room and I'm not in there with you and you need help, then just say, hey, come over to our room. So breakout rooms, 2 rooms. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to open the rooms, and then I think it asks you if you want to join it or something like that. And then we'll see. I remember last time this was kind of confusing. If you have a hard time, this main room area still stays open, and I'll be floating back and forth. So just type in the chat, I can't get in, I'm stuck, something, and I'll figure out how to help you. All right, so I opened the rooms. I think it asks you to attend the room. And then, okay, people who are in breakout room 1, which is Aurora, Janie, Samantha, and Jacob. Oh, Troy, I will add you. Give me a second. I'm sending the link right now to your PowerPoint. So breakout room 1, Aurora, Jacob, Janie, and Samantha. That's your PowerPoint. Breakout room 2, I don't know if you guys can hear me. Okay, breakout room 2. Now I'm gonna go to them. Oh, cool. Peyton, put you into. Okay, so Troy, I'm not sure why you're not showing up on here. Let me figure this out. We got Peyton. So Troy, you're here. And I see you, but it's not letting you get added to a room. What? That's super weird. All right, join the room. Okay, hold on, Troy. Give me a second. All right. Sorry, breakout room 1. Did you guys get your link? I couldn't tell if I was sending it to you guys or to everyone. But if you look in the chat, I put the link for breakout room 1 as the first one for Huntington's disease. Okay, so let me recopy it in here. Okay, so this is the link for Huntington's if you look in the chat. I just sent it again. Okay, so you guys are just gonna open that, and then, like I said, you can talk to each other, or in the document, you can type in the chat in the document and say, hey, I wanna do this slide, I wanna do this slide, whatever, however you wanna break it up. All right, I'm gonna take the sickle cell link, I'm gonna go to breakout room 2. Whoa, how do we have so many people in this one and like not that many people in breakout room 2? All right, oh, because I'm in here. Okay, I'm not actually in here. All right, I'm gonna go to breakout room 2. I will be back in a moment. All right, breakout room 2. In the chat, I don't know if you guys saw the document, but I'm gonna post yours again. Right, that's the one for sickle cell anemia. So open the document and then you can chat in the PowerPoint, and I will be back in a few minutes. If you have a question, type it in the chat. All right, Troy's still here. Let's see. Why, Troy? Why won't it let you go into a breakout room? I wonder if I can just move you. No. Okay. This is really weird. Okay, so Troy, what I'm gonna do is you don't really need to be in the room because I think that they're gonna type in the chat. So what I'm gonna do is this link right here that I just sent, that is to breakout room 2. That's the PowerPoint that they're in. So go to that PowerPoint, even though you're not gonna be in the Zoom room with them, it doesn't matter, they're not talking. So just go in this PowerPoint and you can join in on the chat box and work with them that way. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, awesome, Troy. And I don't know why I won't let you join. That's super confusing and weird. But I'm gonna go back now to breakout room 2 and let them know that you're in their group too, okay? All right, breakout room 2. Troy is also in your group, but for some reason it won't let him join, which I don't understand. So he's gonna just be in the PowerPoint with you guys. Not that it really matters. I don't think people are gonna talk in this thing, but in the chat, Troy will be there with you guys too. That's weird. Okay. Wait a second. Kendrick, stop. Okay. All right. People should be coming back from their breakout room. Looks like we're still waiting on a couple people in breakout room 2 who hopefully are going to be joining us because they have 17 seconds. Better tell them in the document. Uh-oh, if I could get to it. There we go. No! Oh, I hate this toolbar. It's always in the worst place. Okay. I also have way too much stuff open on my computer, clearly. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everyone's back in. Got everything open. Sorry, Keaton, you can keep working. We're just gonna do a quick closing. So keep going, you can finish your sentence there. Okay, so while he's finishing up with the sickle cell, we're gonna go look really quickly at what people have done here. I hope you guys enjoy stuff like this because I want us to kind of interact, and this isn't like too much interaction, just like a little bit, and kind of working together to present something here. So Huntington's disease, it is inherited from your parents, right? It is a dominant gene. So all you need is one copy to get the disease. Great job with the pictures here, right? A brain showing it's actually a neurological disorder, right? A pedigree, which is, or a family tree, right? Which kind of shows how things move through a family. And then even Punnett squares here showing the effect of this gene. So symptoms, right? Personality changes, depression, irritability, aggressive behavior, dance-like movements, you can't stand up straight, abnormal eye movements, slurred or slowed speech, difficulty swallowing, and then eventually just difficulty planning, organizing, memory, right? It's kind of similar to like Alzheimer's a little bit, and your brain just slowly, goes away, basically. So that's super intense, right? Now, it is most common in people of European ancestry, right? It's not super common, as you can see, 3 to 7 people per 100,000. That's not like crazy, but it happens. And then why is it so scary, right? Well, the brain's breaking down. That's pretty scary, right? Also, this is key here. I wrote this in for you guys because adults do not show symptoms until they are over age 40. Right? So you've already had kids, you already have a life, you already have all your stuff, you led a completely normal life. Like you're 43 years old, you go to the doctor and you find out that you have this, right? That is scary because 1, you could have passed it on to your kids, right? And 2, you're aware of how great of a life you had, and now you know that your brain is going to break down slowly, right? So very intense, and as someone wrote here, there's no cure, right? They basically just try to get you to exercise, eat well, and go to lots of counseling and therapy because it's really emotionally traumatizing, as you can imagine. So then one example, this is great, right? So even if one parent has it, you have a 50% chance of inheriting that gene, right? So as a child, Like if your mom or dad had this, right, you would know you then have a 50% chance of getting it. And you can go get tested for that, right, which is a scary experience, I'm sure, if you're a young child and you go find out if you're going to have this. Sickle cell, right, completely different situation here. So sickle cell is unique because the heterozygous person, right, somebody with one dominant and one recessive gene, they have a pretty regular life for the most part. This disease does impact your red blood cells, so it can affect breathing, right? And it can affect anemia and all sorts of other blood issues. So it is a dominant disease, right? I guess we should add that in here. But when it is with a heterozygous person, right, it's only half expressed. Sometimes we call that co-dominance, right, which is kind of a weird situation. It's not completely dominant. Right, it makes the red blood cells sickled, which we'll see a picture of later. If you have two dominant traits, all of your cells are sickled. If you have one, half of your cells are sickled. And then if you have two recessive alleles, none of your cells are sickled. Right, which population is it most common in? About 85,000 Americans have sickle cell anemia, right? The hemoglobin is abnormal, which causes you to not hold oxygen as well, right? It's most common in the African American population and the African population. So anyone who lives in Africa or has genetics from Africa, recent genetics from Africa, right? They are more likely to have this. Why? Right? Because sickle cell anemia actually helps you be resistant to malaria, right? So people with sickle cell anemia have resistance to malaria, therefore they're able to live long lives, passing on the trait through the process of natural selection. I could not have said it better myself, right? They live through malaria and then they're able to pass this trait on to their offspring, right? So I included this life cycle of malaria picture. It's kind of small, but you can blow it up later and look at it. It's pretty disgusting, right? But malaria lives in your blood cells. And if they're strangely shaped, like this sickle cell here, malaria cannot infect those, right? Normal red blood cell, sickle cell. And then again, here's the sickle cell allele, right? How many people have it and the amount of malaria. And you can even look at world maps and see similar patterns. So this helps you survive through malaria. And then our own Punnett square, right? If one parent with a sickle cell trait of SS and another with regular cells, S lowercase, lowercase, what are their chances that their child will inherit the sickle cell anemia? Excellent. So that can be something that you could solve. So that was just a really quick dive into two diseases that I picked because I find both of them pretty interesting, especially since Huntington's you don't know about until way later in your life, which is terrifying, and sickle cell because it actually has a purpose, right? It's a trait that will probably continue to be seen in populations because it does help resist malaria. Okay, so there's two exits for this. I know this was a really long virtual session. Thank you guys for staying with me for this whole time. This is gonna take 3 hours to upload to YouTube, I can already imagine. Okay, so I'm asking you to send me both of these exits by Wednesday at 8 a.m. I have copied and pasted them into a virtual session page in Canvas. I'm like blanking on what it's called. So if you go to the third module here, cell reproduction, even if you're not in that one yet, you will see virtual session 1121 genetics. If you click on that, right, the PowerPoint's there. I'm going to be uploading the video when it's done. And then I wrote both of the exits here. So that's another place you can access these, and you can access the whole PowerPoint. So the first one is a moral kind of question, right? Which is really something that is hard to think about. So write a paragraph in which you pretend you are an expecting mother or father. You have the option of getting a karyotype of your child done to see if it has Down syndrome. Some mothers would then choose to abort the child in order to prevent it from having a life with Down syndrome. Describe the type of karyotype we would see if the child had Down syndrome. Part 2, whether you would want to know in advance, right? Would you want to know so you can plan? Would you want to know so you can make other choices, etc.? And then how would the child's life be affected, right? So think about someone with Down syndrome. You might have to research a little bit more about the traits if you're not familiar with it, but thinking about how their life would be affected. Exit part 2 is about the genetic diseases, right? We just looked at the 2 PowerPoints together. They're going to be linked. You can always access them. If genetic diseases are fatal, right, why are they still in a population? Not even fatal, but just, we'll say fatal or detrimental, because really sickle cell's not. I guess if you have 2 dominant traits, it probably does impact your life expectancy. Life expectancy. Okay. So why are they still in the population? Give a specific example of why these 2 diseases particularly stay in the population. There should be some commas in there. All right. And then if your mom had Huntington's disease, would you want to get tested? Why or why not? Another kind of moral question. Would you want to know? Also scary to think about. I don't know if I would want to get tested. I would probably just live my life and then see how that went. Okay, so it is really sad. So that was just a little tiny glimpse into genetics, right? Reviewing dihybrid crosses, karyotypes, and then kind of getting into the more, I think, interesting part, diseases, how these things run in families, how we could treat these things, right? There is some newer technology called gene therapy, right, where you can actually insert genes into people using viruses. So that's kind of a way that people are trying to get around this. Like, if we can identify the gene that is causing this problem, we could, in theory, alter it, right? But that's another thing where it's kind of like, are we playing God at that point? Should we be doing that? Right? So there's a lot of moral questions here with science that start coming up. So hopefully this was an interesting virtual session for you. If you really liked something, you liked doing the PowerPoints, or you liked the poll everywhere, like getting to respond to questions, let me know, because then I'll keep doing those things. Otherwise, if you really didn't like something, like you thought it was too long, which I know is kind of long, then you can also let me know. Just send me an email. You could say it in the chat, whatever. So otherwise, we are going to end this session now. Those 2 exit questions are going to be due by Wednesday, 8 a.m., right? Because technically Wednesday is not a school day, but if you, for some reason, want to work on it on Wednesday morning, like, I'm not going to stop you. Again, just email those to me. Canvas won't let me make a new assignment, so I'm going to be keeping track via email. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I will see you guys next week when we do a in-person lab. Hopefully you can come, or virtual session lab. All right. Bye.